This is a presentation of OneLogin training.
Welcome to Managing OneLogin Part 2. Now, let's take a look at our user-related tasks. For this module, we're going to take a look at basically 5 key tasks you might need to do in regards to users that have been created within the OneLogin directory. First is assume user, which, as we already kind of stated, means you're logging into the system as if you were the user and seeing what they would see. Then we'll take a look at how to reset user passwords. We recommend that you enable self-service password reset, but on occasion, users still might need some help. So knowing how to reset their passwords, kind of helpful. Then we'll take a look at how to revoke MFA. This can come in handy if a user, say, loses their additional authentication factor, like they lose their cell phone that their authentication app runs on. Also want to see how to, say, unlock an account if users manage to lock themselves out. And last but not least, we'll take a look at how to perform bulk operations. So first, let's look at assume user. Again, keep in mind, the ability to assume access as a user is by default only available to those with high admin privileges, such as super users or the account owner. However, it can be added to other privilege levels. So before we dive into how to assume access as a user, let's just take a look at what it entails so you have really an idea of what we're talking about. So we'll look at how to find a user, then assume access to them, see how the screen looks different to us when we've assumed access as our user account, and then revert back to our regular. So in my last demo, I actually logged in as one of my users, but again, probably not a good practice for me to actually know the username and password for any of my users, so can't depend upon that to see what my user's experience might be. So we are exploring the assume users functionality here. So we'll pick on the same user, Brian. So I can select Brian's record, just need to search for him or browse to him, and then I'm just going to go to this More Actions menu up here in the right. Click on Assume User, check out Brian's portal. Might want to give some sort of information. I'll go into the event log, and I click Assume. So I can see, it says Brian up here in the right-hand corner. I'm seeing those same applications I saw when we previously logged in. However, I should not be able to actually log into any of these applications as Brian. Again, by default, I actually can't do that. You could enable it on a per application basis, but by default, I cannot go in and access his actual application data. So when I clicked on it, it just opened a new tab and brought me back to the portal. But I can see the apps that he has. I can go see his profile information, like, authentication factors he might have registered and such. But notice also I can't go and see his secure notes. Secure notes isn't listed up here. So I do not have access to his secure notes. I do not have the ability to actually log in to applications as Brian, but I can kind of see, again, what his general experience would be if he were logged in, if I needed to help him out in some way. When I'm done helping him out, then I can go back up to that user drop down and say revert to admin. So this is taking me back to being logged in as myself. It has yelled at me for trying to log into Google Workspace as Brian, but now I'm back to my demo admin user here. All right, so now that we have an idea of what assuming user access looks like, again, why would you need to use it? Well, basically so you can see what the user is seeing. It's kind of helpful sometimes for troubleshooting with users to make sure you are seeing exactly what they're seeing, maybe confirm their experience, And if you need to give them step-by-step instructions like how to register an MFA factor, well, you can give them step-by-step instructions that match their experience, because again, depending upon the user that you are within OneLogin, that affects what you see, what you might be assigned. Therefore, seeing the world through the user's eye, very, very helpful. Then, of course, who has the ability to assume user access? Well, again, by default, it would be the account owner and anyone who is a super user. Also, if somebody has one of the manage user or manage group privilege levels assigned to them, assume user can be added to one of those out-of-the-box privilege levels. If your organization has the delegated admin add-on, assume user access can be added to any of the custom privilege levels you might create with delegated admin. Keep in mind, if your organization has decided that they do not want anyone to be able to assume access as users, that feature can actually be disabled at a high level. The only person who can control this would be the account owner. They would go to the settings menu, choose account settings, and notice there is a section on the basic tab of the account settings page there called assuming users. There are two checkboxes. The first checkbox controls whether this basic assume user access within your OneLogin account is enabled or not. So if that allow assuming users access checkbox is cleared, then even super users or the account owner would not have the ability to assume access as any of the users. The allow external assuming checkbox is relating to OneLogin's support team being able to assume access as users when necessary for sort of advanced troubleshooting purposes. Again, some organizations clear that checkbox and choose to only enable it when it is necessary and they are working with OneLogin support. One note there down at the bottom, of course, is if you do have assume user access and it's enabled for your organization, you do not have the ability to assume user access for those users who have higher privileges than yourself. So, how do you assume user access? Well, first find the user, then select that user, and then go to the More Actions menu on the user record. And if you have the ability to assume user access, you will see Assume User in the More Actions list. Pop-up will ask you why you're doing this. Nice to put in a decent reason. It's part of the event log then. And once you click on Assume, you will see the portal as if you were that user. Once you are doing what you need to get done, then you can click on the account icon, like for Dulce, in the upper right-hand corner there and revert to your main admin privileges, kind of like logging out as them. Okay. Now, some of the things you can or cannot do. So, for example, by default, you actually cannot click on a user's apps while assuming access as them, meaning you can't log into their applications as them by default. If you do need this functionality, it can be enabled though. The only person who can enable it would be that account owner. So an account owner would have to go to that application. Like here we're saying Office 365 V2 app connector settings within the OneLogin portal. And the account owner on the SSO tab, down towards the bottom, will see the Allow Assumed Users to Sign into this app option. If that is checked, then anybody who is assuming access as that user would have the ability to log into that user's, in this case, Office 365 account. But I will restate, by default, this is not enabled for any of the applications. So when assuming access as the user, basically get to see some of their profile information and then the apps that have been assigned to them. But you cannot then log into those apps, again, by default. One of the main benefits of implementing OneLogin is that by default, users have the ability to reset their own passwords, which could save you as an administrative type user a lot of time. However, in some cases, users might need extra help, or your organization has decided to disable this feature. So knowing how to reset a user's password can kind of come in handy. Before we actually see how to reset a user password as an administrator, we do want to understand what that self-service process is like and what is involved. So if self-service is enabled, which it is by default, then users will have the ability to click on, from the login screen, Forgot Password. Once they click there, they simply have to confirm their username. And when they click Continue, what will happen from that point will depend upon what has been configured in the user security policy that applies to them. That user security policy can control quite a few options. For example, down at the bottom of this Account Recovery tab on this user security policy, we see Select Factors Available. This will show whatever authentication factors have been enabled for your OneLogin account instance, and then you can choose one or more of them for users to utilize when they are trying to reset their password. So lots of applications out there simply use email. That would be that first checkbox there. So whatever the email field says for the OneLogin user within the directory itself will be sent an email confirmation. But there are quite a few other options there, again, depending upon what authentication factors have been enabled for the user. Some of the other settings on this page can also be important to know about. For example, whether users can reset their passwords at all. That's that first checkbox up there. Don't want them to have that ability. You can clear that checkbox. Now, it might cause some problems if their password expires and they don't reset it in time. But, again, you don't want them to reset it. Don't want to use that self-service process. Clear the checkbox. The allow users to unlock their accounts is relative to users that got themselves locked out because maybe they, flubbed their password too many times when they were trying to log in. If the allow users to unlock their accounts checkbox is checked, then again, one of these authentication factors could be used to confirm the user is who they say they are, and they can unlock it themselves and then change their password possibly. Or keep the checkbox cleared, and as an admin type user, you might be the one who has to unlock the user account, which we'll look at how to do next couple of modules here. Last bit there is the little reCAPTCHA. reCAPTCHA is used, of course, to make sure that when users are going through the process that they are not some sort of bot or script that is running. Therefore, they have to kind of interact with the reCAPTCHA system to prove that they are human when they're, again, going through a password reset process. Now, typical way, or one of the easiest ways to reset a password for users. So aside from the self-service password, if you need to come along and reset a password for the user, then you can send them an invite. It's the same method that you go through when a user is first added to the system and they need to set up their brand new password. Keep in mind, users that are configured to use external directories, such as Active Directory, to actually authenticate them, might not be able to reset their password through OneLogin. It's a feature that's enabled by default, but could be disabled for your organization. If those users, again, are disabled for being able to reset their password from OneLogin through to that back-end directory like Active Directory, then the invite that they'll get will simply tell them that they're an Active Directory user. If they do have the ability to reset their password, then the invite will include basically a link that will allow them to reset their password. Okay. Also, just kind of important, make sure that, if the process that you're going through is that a user needs to kind of call in if they need to reset their password, or they're emailing you this request, that you have some sort of an official way of verifying that the request is actually coming from the user. You don't want to be the victim of some sort of social engineering attack where someone is pretending to be one of your actual users and you're now giving them the ability to reset a password and get into a valid user's account. So make sure that there is some process in place for your organization, that you are verifying you're talking to actual people who are supposed to have access to these accounts. Another option for changing a user's password is to, again, go to that user's account, and from the same More Actions menu, just choose Change Password. This means you as an admin are actually setting the password, and then you're going to have to figure out some way of transmitting that temporary password to that user. So the invite is a much more secure process, but sometimes this is required, or sometimes maybe you do really need to get into this account. Somebody needs to take over the account, so you need to change the password so you can get in. So, again, this is maybe not the favorite way of doing it, but it is an alternate method. Most OneLogin implementations require users to provide more than one authentication factor. And of course, users on occasion might lose those additional authentication factors. If so, they're going to need your help in order to get back in and register new ones. So, if a user loses their auth factor, such as their YubiKey or the phone they have their Authenticator app installed on, you need to perform two basic tasks, once, of course, you found that user account. First, you're going to need to revoke the device they lost, so no one else can use it. Then you're going to need to generate a new token for them so that they can get into the OneLogin portal and register a new authentication factor. Notice you can now set the time to live for that new token. On a side note, if SMS is one of the authentication factors your OneLogin account has enabled for your users, they might have the ability to set their own phone number. This is a feature that would need to be enabled for them on their user security policy. If it is enabled, they will see they have the ability to edit their own phone number within their profile. We all know that once in a blue moon, a user forgets or flub fingers their password one too many times and manages to lock themselves out. Knowing how to unlock them can come in handy. How many times they can flub finger their password and how long they'll actually be locked out from is determined based upon settings in their user security policy. Here we can see maximum invalid login attempts is 5, and they would be locked out for 15 minutes. Notice we also have a checkbox here for disable password updates on locked accounts. So by default, it's unchecked, meaning they lock themselves out. They could trigger a forgot password kind of process, reset their password and get in. If you do not want them to have that ability, then you would come along and check the checkbox, disable password updates on locked accounts. So if they manage to lock themselves out, there's really no way of getting back in unless they wait for that effective period to pass, or they reach out to support and support manually unlocks them. What does it look like to a user if they happen to lock them out? Well, a red pop-up will pop on up there and tell them what's happened. Account has been locked up because too many failed login attempts. Wait for a while, or go contact administrator. Notice again that forgot password option is still available for them under the try again button. It will be available for them by default unless that other checkbox we just mentioned is checked over on the user security policy. For the user, if again they got locked out and they try to log back in before the lock effective period has expired, they will get an access denied message as we see over on the right hand side here. So they don't want to wait that 15, 30, whatever you set it to number of minutes for the lock to expire, and they call an administrative user to help them out as an admin user. Your process is to go search for that user on the main user page, and you'll see an unlock button next to their name. So from the right hand side, you'll see the user is locked. You click on where it says unlock, and voila, that user has been unlocked. Easy peasy. Being able to perform the same action against multiple users at a time can, of course, be a huge time saver. Thus, we're going to take a look at our bulk operations. So when performing bulk operations, you could perform them against all users, or you could filter based upon, say, a OneLogin group or a OneLogin role that the user belongs to, and or their status. The types of operations that you can perform are listed here. You could select, say, all those users that are deactivated or unlicensed and come along and activate them. You could activate and automatically send them a bunch of invitations, delete users, force them to log out, force a bunch of password resets if you need to, do a little reapply of mappings. We'll talk more about what mappings are later on in this course. Maybe just resend or send for the first time a whole bunch of invitations, suspend, and finally unlicense those users. So again, saves a lot of time to be able to do these types of bulk operations versus having to go into each one of the intended user accounts, go to their more actions menu, and individually choose these options. Let's take a quick look at how to perform a bulk operation against a bunch of users. All right, I'm going to check out how to do a little bulk operation here. I'm going to go to the admin UI. You need to go to the main users page here, and underneath more actions, I see bulk operations. By default, account owner, super users, those who have manage user type privileges would be able to access this bulk operations option here. So in this case, let's go for maybe all those users who have never logged in. So we'll go by status, and we want to send them an invite. Maybe they forgot, we sent them an invite before, they still haven't logged in, we really want to get adoption here, so we're just going to say grab everybody who's never logged in and send them an invitation. That's a total of 40 users for this particular account, and I'm going to click continue, and voila, I am sending out a nice set of invitations to those users. Now what that did also do is automatically create a background process or a job. So I could actually see its progress over here through my job monitor. Underneath the activity menu, jobs, I can see it in process. If I click fast enough, I might be able to stop it. I can't actually resume it from here. I can only stop it. It won't necessarily undo what it's already done. But if these were like hundreds of invites I mistakenly sent out, at least again, I don't have to wait for all of them to go out if I made a mistake. Click stop. Okay. Mainly this page though is for just monitoring, tracking progress, as well as seeing whether particular jobs that have been run were successful or they failed. And if they failed, you can actually get access to some error messages through here. But main piece, main users menu, bulk operations. I can trigger them by going to more actions and choosing bulk operations. This concludes Part 2 of Managing OneLogin. Please continue on to Part 3 so you can review how to update passwords for forms-based applications.
This is a presentation of OneLogin training.